ministry wife is a vocation without a job description. And let's be honest, sometimes it seems like ministry might be easier if we did have one. If you are a ministry wife like me and are looking for hope, perspective, and a little bit of practical advice regarding your role, you're in the right place. I'm Christine Hoover. Welcome to the Ministry Wives Podcast, a production of the North American Mission Board. Join me as we hear from women from various ministry contexts, having authentic conversations about our shared joys and challenges, even the ones we're unsure we can talk about. No topic is off limits. Today, my guest is Macy English. Macy is the owner and principal consultant of English Media, where she helps businesses with all things sales and marketing. She serves at Storyline Church in Colorado, where her husband, JT, is the lead pastor. They have 2 kids and love to travel. Macy joins me today to talk about women and work. Pastors' wives who work, this episode is for you. Macy talks about her calling to work and how that calling overlays with her role as a pastor's wife. Here, friends, is my conversation with Macy English. I am so excited to welcome Macy English to the podcast. Welcome, Macy.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I'd love to hear just a little bit about your ministry context because it's fairly new to you, right?
Yeah. So it all started right when the pandemic hit.
It all started.
We were at a large church in the Dallas-Fort Worth area where my husband was on staff there. And the Lord called him to be a lead pastor of a church here in Arvada, Colorado called Storyline Church. And we started here in the spring of 2020. So we transitioned in the middle of the pandemic and have been here since. So it's been a wild 3 years, but the Lord has been really faithful through it all. And yeah, it's probably the hardest time, but that's largely where we're doing our ministry context this year. It's a suburb of Denver.
Okay. And are you from Texas? And this is the first time you've lived outside?
Yeah, that's a great question. We both would claim Colorado as home.
Oh.
We largely both grew up here. Yeah.
Oh, fun.
But I was technically born in Texas, so I am a Texan by birth, but the majority of my life has been in Colorado. So JT and I went to high school here. We met in college and then moved around for various ministry assignments, and then for about 12 years, and were able to come back home in a way. So it's been really sweet to be here, to be backed, and to just kind of dig in locally with the people that we love and know, and an area that we have a large heart and passion for.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great. I didn't know that y'all had grown up there. So it's a little bit like going home.
Mhm.
But this is the first time he's been a lead pastor, right?
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear a little bit about that transition. So you're married to a guy on a really large church staff. You know, he's not the head guy, but now he is. And that's a big leap.
It is. Yeah. I don't think we quite anticipated the weight of the transition of what that would mean for our marriage and our family and serving the church. He was leading a large all of adult discipleship in the larger multi-site church that we were at in Texas. And so there was a lot of responsibility and weight and people that we were ministering to and caring for in that context. But yeah, moving to a lead pastor role is, in some ways it feels really lonely, if I'm really honest, because you just don't know what it's like until you're in that role.
That's right.
And you can think you know what it's going to be like because you know the lead pastor, you love him, you love his wife, you serve with alongside them, but it just is something that you just don't understand the weight or the calling or honestly even the blessings and the joy that come with it as well, unless you're in that role specifically. So it's been a sweet and weighty season of entering into that and learning that role and what God has for us in that. So yeah, it's been a wild ride.
I'm wondering for you specifically, because you're, by nature of the role of what JT is doing, you are suddenly a lot more visible.
Yeah.
And that can be, I think that's a little almost like jarring. So I'm wondering how you're navigating that specifically.
Yeah, and quite honestly, I mean, not to make it all about the pandemic, but I was able to not be as visible because we weren't allowed to gather in person for quite
Uh-huh.
some time, and then it was 50 people were allowed to gather, and then 200 people, and then more and more from there. So I think the visibility of the role grew with how many people were able to gather in a room to worship on a Sunday morning. For me, and most recently, I am realizing that there is, yeah, there's a weight and a responsibility, and people are starting to notice, how do I parent my kids in the lobby when they're running around like hooligans? Or, how do I worship? What am I wearing? Like the comments that people have made, I'm a little caught off guard by
Yeah.
it, but I'm like, oh yeah, there's you just have to be aware that you kind of live in a
Mhm.
fishbowl, and where you go, people are watching, and you not to be fake or put on, this outside glossy appearance that we want to seem perfect, but to be aware that, like, no, I just want to be human, and I
Right.
want to model what it means to be human and to be Christ-like, and to also experience brokenness and suffering and all the things that everybody else is experiencing at the same time.
Mhm.
So it's definitely a new role, and the visibility. I don't take it lightly, and I want to make sure that I steward it well,
Yeah.
and not be fake or
Right.
performative, but also just really authentic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is the challenge right there.
Mhm.
Because I mean,
Mhm.
for me, and when I was a lead pastor's wife, I didn't even think about it very much that people were watching me. I mean, and then you would be reminded, and that's when it's
Yeah.
jarring. It's like, "Oh, I
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
forgot. I'm not even thinking about performing for people." And so I
Yeah.
forget that I mean, just people say such funny things.
Mhm.
So I'd love to talk about the humanity part, because part of the
Yeah.
humanity for you and for many pastors' wives listening is a whole nother aspect of life, which is work. That
Yeah.
we're working outside the home. And you and I were talking before, we just don't hear many pastors' wives talking about that.
No.
And I think that part of that is because, uh, well, I don't know what you would say, but part of that is because I think sometimes we get the idea that that might be wrong, or
Mhm.
um, our primary call is to be a pastor's wife. And so I'd love to
Mhm.
know just even what you think about that. Why do we not hear pastors' wives talking about their work?
Yeah. I honestly think it's because not I would say more so are working, but largely history would show that a lot of pastors' wives have not worked. Or if they've worked, they work primarily in the church in some sort of a role with ministry, women's ministry, children's ministry, something like that. And there hasn't been a lot of, I don't know, maybe role models or people actually stepping out and saying, no, I work and I work outside the church. And I really think it goes back to, in our minds, we have a large division between sacred and secular work, especially as believers. And the more you get into ministry circles and ministry contexts, if your spouse is working in that area as well, it can seem like, well, this is more, quote unquote, more godly, right? To be a professional Christian means I'm really serving the Lord. But if I work at Frito Lay, then that means I'm somehow sacrificing what God has really called me to.
Yeah.
And when we go back to Scripture and we see what God has commanded both men and women to do before even the fall, right? And looking at the cultural mandate, the call of being fruitful and multiplying and subduing the earth and taking what God has created, and we get to take that and make culture out of it, make something beautiful out of it. That goes all over the earth. It's not just, well, in the church or outside the church. And so I think largely it has to begin with us having a conversation around there, all of work is sacred. And when we start to look at all of work as sacred, the Lord can redeem and birth something really beautiful out of the Excel spreadsheet I'm building, right? Even if that's the mundane, right? We would, in conversations around being gospel centered in our homes with our children, there's lots of conversation right now about taking the mundane and how can we redeem it and see that we're doing a good work, whether it's laundry or dishes or getting kids ready for school or, in the home. And I want to take that conversation and actually think about what does that look like in work as well, with
Mhm.
the good task that the Lord has given us. How can we steward that and honor and glorify him with what we've been given and commanded by God with the skills
Mhm.
he's given us?
Mhm. Well, tell us what you do for work.
Oh, yeah. So I am the owner and principal consultant of English Media, a marketing agency, and largely I help businesses with all things sales and marketing. So, yeah.
Okay. Did you
Mhm.
start this a long time ago? The business?
Um, about 4 years ago. Mhm. Yeah,
Okay.
so my career has largely been in sales and advertising and marketing. My degree's in marketing, graduated from Colorado State University, go Rams. We're rebounding with all of our sports programs, but man, I'm proud to be a CSU Ram. Yeah, so I graduated in marketing, and largely my whole career has been in that field. And so I worked for media organizations, and then most recently, a social media tech company. And then I left that and kind of pivoted. And I really thought that might have been a season where the Lord was calling me to stay at home full time with my kids, and it that lasted about 3 months, and then the Lord really I like to say I didn't start my business, the Lord just threw me right into it. It was being faithful, having conversations, people needed help on the side, and I was like, "Oh, sure, I'll come and sit in on your meeting and just help whatever I can," to keep using the skills that the Lord gave me, and all of a sudden, I was like, "Well, I guess I should formalize this and
Yep.
make build it into something." So, yes, I've done that for 4 years, and it's been a real blessing. I
That's
enjoy it.
great.
Mhm.
So you come into Storyline already with this business.
Yeah.
Did the church and do currently the people in your church know what you do?
Yeah. So they do, and that honestly was really intentional from the very beginning, even in the interview process. JT is by far my number one cheerleader, supporter. He's the reason that I even have a career. I mean, being raised, I was a pastor's kid growing up, so I saw my mom dabbled in side work here and there, but I don't think she would say she had a career. And so largely what I saw modeled was I'm going to marry a man who loves the Lord, and like I'm just going to stay home, have babies, and we're going to serve our church, and that's what we're going to do. And JT's upbringing was more in the corporate career setting. His parents all worked, and so in us getting married, he was like, "Hey, I really think he has called out gifts that he has seen in me that the Lord has given me to steward." And so I attribute all of that to him. So coming into Storyline, he really was communicating with the search team, the elders, and even like we had these because the pandemic hit, we had 17 Zoom
Oh
calls
my
to like meet the
goodness.
meet the pastor candidate and his wife in 1 week, right when
Oh
the
my
pandemic hit. So we got
goodness.
used to Zoom real quick. But anyway, in all of that, I was going to be a faithful member. That is how we positioned it. Like, I have a job, I'm passionate about work. That was attractive to several people in our congregation because largely our church is in a context where there's a lot of dual income families.
Mhm.
There's not a lot of single income families because it is kind of expensive to live in Colorado. So I think that was an encouragement to a lot of women as me coming here. But yeah, from the beginning, we were very, I guess, just upfront and honest with what our family feels called to, the roles and responsibilities of me, and what they can expect from me as a pastor's wife is that I will love and support their pastor in every way, shape, and form. I'll be a faithful mom and a faithful member, and then a faithful worker
Mhm.
outside the home. So, yeah.
So let's talk about that because I think that there are two ways that I have experienced my intersection of work and
Mhm.
church. One is that people they might know or they might not know what I do, but they primarily see me as the pastor's wife and that's how
Yeah.
they engage me. And
Mhm.
so rarely do people ask me about my work.
Yeah.
And there is kind of um maybe whether they would voice it or not, kind of an idea or an expectation of what I'm going to be in relationship to them. And it's the pastor's wife.
Yeah.
And so that can really create a tension for me with my time. I'm wondering for you how you've experienced that tension of if people know or don't know, but they primarily see you as the pastor's wife and kind of their expectations on you there, especially with your time. I'd love to know about that.
Yeah. So I would say in every opportunity, even that JT has from the stage or as a pastor, like it really starts with your husband positioning it and being able to be vocal in the spaces that he has given to lift you up, to encourage you, to remind people what your family is stewarded with and what you are being faithful with. When you introduce yourself, if you have an opportunity to say that, as well as asking other people, do you work outside the home? What do you do to work if you work? And having that being a normal conversation, like in the lobby, if you're getting to know a new person, and that's just kind of a um, kind, gentle way to engage and say, like, hey, this is going to be a topic of conversation that I want to get to know all of you, not just the part of you that serves at this church. And so I think if we can model that to our members, then they'll also be able to understand that work is a part of all of life, and it's not just our family only does ministry. But as far as time is concerned, yeah, because it can seem like, well, aren't you available for all these coffees and lunches? And whenever you want to get together, I would love to get together. So a couple things on that. I currently, right now, I work part-time hours, so I'm able to be available throughout the week for the other things that might come up. So I'm really grateful that I can kind of steward and flex my time that way. But primarily, as far as order of time, I absolutely have to be available for my husband and my kids. No one else can be those roles. So, from a relationship standpoint, I wish I could have a personal relationship with every single person in the church. Like, it's something I actually have to fight against, is making sure that I have the priorities right of like, what has God stewarded Macy English with only? The only person who can be a wife to JT is me. The only person who can be a mom to those kids is me. And the only person who can steward my gifts and skills that the Lord has given me is me. Nobody can do that job. And then outside of that, with whatever time is left over, how can I additionally serve the church? The largest way, I hope every pastor's wife who's listening to this, the largest way you can serve your church and the most important is to love and support your husband and your family. And I feel like that's also minimized of like, well, yeah, that should be there. And then you should also lead women's ministry. You should also be teaching. You should also be doing all of these other things. And the weight of that, of all of the things you quote unquote should be doing in the church, can really diminish and hinder how much we can build up and pour into the only place where we can pour into. Nobody in the church can serve my husband like I can. They can't. And so that is a wonderful responsibility that I am grateful for. And so with that and work, and then if I'm able to, relationships outside of that, meet with women, be able to pour into them, disciple them, and to be very upfront and honest with, hey, I'm sorry, I don't have time in the next several weeks with all that the Lord has asked from our family. But I would love to get together with you when time permits. Like this isn't a reflection of me not wanting this. I wish I could. I wish I could have a relationship and go deep with every single person. But if we model that, we need to model good stewardship and letting our yes be yes and our no be no to our people so that they can understand, oh, I can live like this too.
That's right.
I don't also have to be all things to all people.
Yeah.
And that can be really freeing.
Yeah. I think that another way that I've seen this in myself, and I don't know if you seem very confident in your decisions, but I felt guilt sometimes about
Yeah.
having this side gig, right? And that I love it, and that it's not connected to my husband, and it's not connected to my kids,
Yeah.
and to my church. And so, I want it to be a blessing to my church, but in some ways I've diminished myself because of that. And, it's not just other people not knowing, it's that I don't tell them. I don't allow them into it because there is a sense of, as you said, that the church ministry takes priority. That's more important. Or
Mm-hmm.
my husband
Yeah.
does is more important. And I should be in a supportive role for that, even though he's extremely supportive of me, as you said, JT is. So have you ever dealt with guilt or what emotions around that have you felt?
Yeah. There have been seasons of too much, and I think this is the thing that absolutely has to go. Like, and it's guilty in the way I love my job. I love it. And so the guilt actually comes around, why do I love something that really costs me or costs my family sometimes?
Mhm.
And that's I wish I could get rid of it sometime. I'm like, oh, it would be so easy if I just was able to not have to worry about this, and I could be more involved at church, or I could meet with more women, or I could volunteer even more at my kids' school. And we start in our hearts, the guilt makes us start to prioritize, like there's not a spectrum. It's then like a greater than, less than, like, well, up here are all of these godly things, right? Of being available for people in the church, serving the church, being able to go to my kids' school, all of these. And those are greater than, godlier than mundane work, sweat of the brow, right? Whatever that might look like for you. And I think we have to remind ourselves that if we're not faithful with what the Lord has stewarded us with, what will he say? Will there be joy? Like, I think my mind right now is going to the parable of the talents.
Mhm.
And the master comes, gives different amounts of talents to 3 different people to double their investment. Great. And the third is, so he goes away and hides it. And there's no return whatsoever because he was fearful of what could happen.
Yeah.
And the first 2 immediately went and invested it, and they come back and their double reward. The master looks at them and says, come, enter into the joy of your master. And I think there is so much fear is what will pull us away from being faithful stewards with what the Lord has given us, fearful of what others will say in the church, fearful of the outcome of what it's going to cost our family. Like, fear holds us back so much. But being a good steward with what the Lord has given us, whether that's skills and abilities that I have to use these for the glory of God, and the joy that will come from that is, I think, what we need to be reminding ourselves of. And we also need to be reminding other sisters who are in ministry, like some house, whether they're in full-time ministry or whether they're also supporting a spouse or a family member who is in ministry, to keep going, for the joy is so great when we see that we've been good stewards of what the Lord has given us.
Mhm.
And we can't shrink back in fear, because we will stand before the Lord. We will not stand before men when we have to give an account for what we've done with what we've been given. So,
Mhm. I
yeah.
think one of the greatest fears is our own fear, for whatever reason. I mean, almost every conversation I have with pastors' wives, and I'm the same, we have this idea of what it means to be a pastor's wife. We have this mold, and other people sometimes do as well
Mm-hmm.
in the church. And so I think that's the greatest fear, is that I'm going to be different. I'm choosing different than what that mold says. And the mold,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the South, is a stay-at-home mom or a homeschooling mom, who is engaged with the church, and that's her primary thing. And if that's what God's called you to do, we're not saying don't do that and go find a job, but go and do that. But sometimes when God calls us to be different, that can feel, that's created fear in me,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
you've said that you feel like a unicorn
Yeah.
sometimes. And so can
Yeah.
you speak to that, and how has God helped you, or what has he taught you in that?
Yeah. So I think that largely, you can feel a little odd when you're the only one, right? And you think there's no one who's doing it quite like I'm doing it, or I'm not fitting into the mold and looking like the general population of pastors' wives, and I'm not writing books and doing a podcast or doing this and that. Like, I mean, then you start to see like celebrity pastors' wives, and then you're like, well, I'm not doing that. So, like, should I be doing XYZ, right? Because we're constantly looking for models
Yes.
or representatives to tell us, what does godliness look like, or what does it look like to be in this role? If it's all so new to me, who's going to help me understand what I'm supposed to be doing? And I really would push us back to, honestly, the book of Matthew. I'm currently studying that in women's Bible study at our church. And I've studied it a couple times, and it just reminds me so much in all of what Jesus is teaching is it's a matter of the heart. He wants your heart. He doesn't want your outward actions. And I think that even in our quote unquote otherness, or if I'm a unicorn or I seem like the only one, what's the real motives there? What is the motives of wanting to look like all other pastors' wives? Are my motives to step out in obedience, and that obedience looks like what a lot of other pastors' wives are doing? Or is the matter of the heart, my obedience makes me look very other than everybody else? And isn't that even a truer picture of the Christian life? Like even in cultural Christianity, we are not going to look like the world around us. We aren't. But so much of what we want is to look like everybody else, to not stand out, to not be different, to not be criticized for making choices that other people aren't making. And I think the Lord has something for us there to be even in our decisions of being other and not looking like the rest. It will model to our people that there is a faithful obedience that does not look like everybody around you. And that's okay. Because my faithful obedience reminds me that I'm being more like Jesus and more like Christ than what other people expect from me.
Yeah, and I think also we look for models because we want to get it right. We want to do things right. We want to honor the Lord. And so sometimes we, instead of looking to him and asking him what that is for us specifically, we look at other people and try to emulate them.
Yeah.
And we end up trying to be somebody we're not, using gifts we don't have instead of using the gifts we do have.
Yes. And the thing I'd say on that too, the encouragement that I have for women listening is find 4 people, find 4 quarters of women. I went to a retreat 6 years ago and they said, rather than 100 pennies, you need 4 quarters. Okay. But find 4 women who can really speak wisdom and truth into your life to encourage you in the choices that you've made. Because there will be, the larger the role, the more visible the role, the more everyone will have their commentary about what you're doing, what they think you should be doing. And I would say just spend some time in prayer and really find 4 women or men who can speak into your life and encourage you that what you're doing with your work or your service or with your time with your family, that those are going to be the voices that can really speak truth and love into you. And that for me has been really freeing because I don't have to worry about outside comments as much as I know I live life fully. They know my brokenness, they know my wins, they know my skills and abilities. And these women can speak truth and love to me in the midst of what could be a really noisy or confusing time as a lead pastor's wife.
Have you ever had an instance where someone has said or implied that they thought you were making the wrong decision? And if so, how did you respond to that?
Yeah. So before we had kids, my husband was getting his PhD, working full time. I was working full time. I was in a very busy career season. I traveled 3 times a month. It just was, it was really fun and it was really full. And there were, I would say well-meaning, but lots of questions around like, when are you going to have kids? Do you travel at certain times so that you can ensure that you're trying to build a family? I can't even believe it, Christine. But there were comments and questions during that time of, wow, you are really committed to your career. And you just receive it and kind of let it go. It just, I think early on I had to start learning to exercise and grow a muscle to receive in kindness other people's thoughts and opinions because they want it to land somewhere, but it's not going to land. I will receive it. Thank you so much. And then I will let it go because what my husband thinks and what my best friends tell me and pour into me and godly older women as well matters far more to me than other commentary. And if I root myself in that, I know this is what matters. This is what's true. Other people's comments and questions aren't. And so I think that building that muscle has served me even to this day of with a more even visible role and people's comments. And our church is awesome. Like these are not, I would say I'm in a season where I am largely built up and encouraged and not questioned. But people I think are forming opinions, but silently. And so that's a new that's a new thing to experience. But our transition here, our good friends, I was wrestling through, do I continue to work? Do I not? How so? Even up into about a year and a half ago, it was a really hard wrestling season for me of, am I doing too much? Where do I put the most energy? And it's still, even to this day, is really, I feel like sometimes it's a daily battle. Like, I don't want to be doing this. I don't want to work. I don't want to, fill in the blank.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I just think that's the toil of life. And that's always, grass is not greener on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have to remind myself, like, am I being faithful? Am I being obedient with what the Lord has given me, what he's equipped me with? And am I bringing glory to him and pushing for the kingdom with my husband and what God's given us? So,
Mm-hmm. I love that
yeah.
you're giving voice to, first of all, that you've implied a lot of conversation between you and JT
Yeah.
of, this is a decision that we're going to make together, that he's for you, you're for
Hmm.
him, and how can we make this work together, because we see gifts that God wants us to steward.
Yeah.
But also you're giving voice to the consistent reevaluation, that we're not holding
Yes.
tightly to something and saying, this is how it has to be. But if
Yeah.
God calls me to lay this down, I will do it. And
Yep.
that's a part of the conversation too with your husband. And then all other voices, yes, there's invited voices in. But so I love that you're giving voice to that. I have found that to be very true over ministry, that nothing is static. It is
Yeah.
always changing.
Hmm.
Always we are having conversations about this new season
Yeah.
based upon where we are, our kids, our work. And so that's what you seem to be saying, is that there's this willingness to give it up. But also there's this
Absolutely.
willingness to do hard things, because that's what God has asked you to do.
Yeah. So the image that came to mind, my mom, when I was little, we were moving. I was in a ministry family, right? We were moving to another state. And my mom sat me down at the kitchen table and opened her hand and placed whatever assignment the Lord was calling us to right in the middle, and her hands were open, fingers all spread out. And she taught me about open-handed stewardship. And what does that look like? How can we leave our hands open? And if the Lord takes something out of our hands, what he puts back will be better. It might not feel better, but it is better for our good and for his glory. And I was like, yeah, but the only thing I'm holding on to, Mom, I had my little pinky finger curled in, was my friends. I didn't want to move. Like I was like, I'll give everything up for Jesus, but I won't give up my friends, And I think that has served us well moving into adulthood and building our own family, is everything we've been given and is an assignment by the Lord, and he can take it away. He can. And that brings a sense of, there's a little bit of fear in that, a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
anxiety, because we love to be rooted, we love to be stable. And, but I also think that there's a beauty in that, of knowing that if the Father gives good gifts and if he takes something away, there is something bigger going on, even if we don't understand it. And so on an annual basis, genuinely, we sit down at the beginning of the year and we sit together as a couple and decide, what has the Lord assigned us to? What do we feel like this next year we should let go of? What should we add more of? What do we feel like would be God honoring, given the season of life that we're in, given all that's going on, our health? Like, we take everything into account. And I would say that's the practice that's served us really well, to make sure that we're still on the same page. Because you can go years of being into certain rhythms, and then you look up and you're like, how did we get here?
Uh-huh.
And we all have that through seasons, but being able to stop and pause and be deliberate about the decisions and do that as a couple, I think that's probably what's kept us the strongest in our marriage, around conversations about work, vocation, what has the Lord called us to. And it's been really refreshing and encouraging, honestly, that JT's been able to lead out in that. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm really grateful. It's been a good rhythm.
And I imagine that gives you a lot of confidence to move forward in what you're doing. having those conversations. And I just think that sometimes I do feel other. I do feel like the unicorn. But I also am like, you know what? If some other woman around me, it gives her gives her the ability to say, well, could I do something that God is laying on my
Mhm.
heart that seems
Yeah.
different or other? And, I want people to feel uh, at peace in my presence because I'm at peace with myself and
Yeah.
who God has made me. And I want them to feel the freedom to be who they are. And
Mhm.
I think that when we walk in that, if somebody, says, no, I can't serve in this way. I love when people say no, because I'm like, good for you
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
you are obeying God.
Yeah.
And so I do you find that women, there's a freedom that they feel around you, especially working women, that they're drawn to
Yeah.
you, that they see an example in you in your church?
Yeah. I do. I think that's what's honestly that was the unexpected encouragement I didn't know that I would receive. Even as I was working in other church contexts that we were in, it would be like the women who were super passionate about their career or working would be like, "Hey, can we meet for coffee and talk about this? Because I've never met someone else like me." So that's been a really sweet thing to be able to encourage women in what the Lord has called them to. And I also want to say there are women who are not called to work for a W-2 outside the home. They're
Mhm.
just not. The Lord doesn't have that for them in this season. And that is beautiful and right and wonderful. And so I want to say all of these things, not like this is the better option,
Right,
right?
right.
But there is an option on the table that if the Lord has gifted and wired you in a way to bring order out of chaos and create beauty from creation, in work and vocation, praise be to God. Like
Mhm.
step out into it and be the best that you can at it.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
yeah, that would be my encouragement.
Yeah, if there's a woman listening who is, it feels when you do an Excel spreadsheet, it feels like worship. Then
I know two of my friends, they would, if they could create pivot tables all day long, that is what they would do.
I
I'm
don't
like,
even know what a
that's
pivot
not me.
table is.
Yeah. Yeah. Someone will chime in and show us visuals of that, but it is a thing and it brings glory to God.
That's right. Well, it seems like you've done a lot of thinking or potentially reading around the idea of faith and work. So I'm wondering, just in closing, if you have any resources you would recommend.
Yeah, two resources I'd recommend. One is Every Good Endeavor by Tim Keller. It's a book. It's amazing. It's like the 101 on faith and work conversations. So if you've never really thought about what the Bible has to say about work, I would start there. The second, well, no, I should say the number one book is the Bible. I mean, the Bible has a lot to say about faith and work and what it means to cultivate the garden that the Lord has placed us in. So dig into scripture and read that. The other thing I would say is Women and Work is a podcast, nonprofit
Mhm.
ministry. They're doing a really great work. They have a book coming out soon that I know will be a resource that blesses a lot of women. But that podcast in particular is every episode would be going through faith and work, particularly as it pertains to women. And so I would share that as a resource as well.
Those are great resources. Thank you so much, Macy, for
Mhm.
coming on and talking with us about this. I've enjoyed getting
Thank
to
you so
talk to
much.
you.
Yeah, it's been a blessing. Thanks so much, Christine.
Thanks so much for listening to the Ministry Wives podcast, a production of the North American Mission Board. If you found this content helpful, please subscribe, rate, and review us on your podcast platform or share it with a friend. You can find this podcast and other helpful resources at ministrywivespodcast.com.